Hi everyone, or should I say, hey there, hi there, ho there. If you're a baby boomer, you probably recognize that greeting. How many of you remember the MOUSEKETEERS? The original MOUSEKETEERS series that ran from 1955 to 1959. Thanks for joining me on my tours of cemeteries, gravesites, memorials, and final resting places of the famous and infamous people who are gone but not forgotten. And if you do remember the show, do you remember the leader of the MOUSEKETEERS, Jimmy? Well, I'm here at his grave at Forest Lawn, Hollywood Hills. And the funny thing is, it's right across the street, basically. Right there, that's Disney Studios. So his grave is basically in the shadow of Disney Studios. And here's his grave here. I don't know if you can see it. I'll turn around so you can actually see it to get a better view. I think I'm going to stand in the shade to try to block a little bit of the wind and also just to get a little shade. It's a very warm day. The mausoleum that you see straight ahead, just at the top of the hill, is called the Courts of Remembrance. And that's where Roy Williams, the co-host of the Mickey Mouse Show, is interred. I'll be visiting his gravesite next. And standing at the top of the hill in front of the Courts of Remembrance Mausoleum, you get an even better view of the Disney Studios, which is just on the other side of the freeway from the cemetery. Now, in addition to being an actor, Jimmy was also a songwriter and composed the theme song to the Mickey Mouse Club. How many of you were fans and how many of you remember the show? And how many of the MOUSEKETEERS can you name? Now, I recently looked them up, and I was really surprised to learn that most of them are still alive. There's really only a handful that have passed on, and some of them are in their 60s and 70s. That's great. I'm glad there are very few MOUSEKETEER graves to visit. Now, unfortunately, the few MOUSEKETEERs who have passed away have either been cremated or, for the most part, their grave sites are unknown. Now I'm going to walk up the hill to visit the outdoor mausoleum crypt of Roy Williams. It's nice to see that Roy and Jimmy probably remained friends long after the show, and they're now buried within view of one another. Roy's crypt is very easy to find. You just follow this sidewalk back to the second courtyard and then make a left, and Roy's crypt is just about in the middle of the wall on the east side of the courtyard. Not only was Roy the co-host of this historic TV show, but he's also credited with being the person who designed the very famous mouse ear hats. I'm guessing that nearly every kid in the country, if not the world, has at one time or another owned a MOUSEKETEER hat. I know I did when I was a kid. It's probably the most famous hat design in history, and I had no idea until now that he was the designer of this famous hat. Who could ask for a more fun legacy than that? To be honest, I don't remember why he was called the Big Mousketeer instead of Mouseketeer. Do any of you recall? He was a big guy, and he was one of the only adults on the show. And maybe it was just because it sounded funny. I'll pan around as usual so you can see a little bit more of the area where Williams is interred. I kind of find it funny that from Roy's crypt, you can view Liberace's crypt just on the other side of the courtyard. These are probably two of the last people that you would ever expect to be buried in the same courtyard. But in Hollywood, you just never know which famous people and celebrities and movie stars you're going to find right next to each other. Just inside the front gates of the cemetery is a beautiful white church called the Church of the Hills. And just across the street to the east is a very tiny section of the cemetery called Blessed Promise. And this is where I'm going to head next. I just found the grave sites of Annette Funicello's parents. They're buried right here. Now, the reason I'm here is according to the Find a Grave Memorial for Annette Funicello, she's supposed to be buried here. Now, she's not listed on their website, so I assume that maybe that was just a mistake. But I thought, well, let me come to her parents' grave sites and see if maybe she's here with them. Now, there is actually, it looks like there is an empty space right next to them. So it's possible that she's in an unmarked grave. I hadn't really noticed that, but it does look like there is an unmarked grave right next to them. So it is possible, but I'm not sure it's very likely. If anyone knows for sure, leave a comment in the comments section. She died, I believe it was up in Bakersfield, I believe. And she was married and has children. She has her own life, so it's not likely that she would be buried with her parents. Quite often, children are buried with their parents when they're single, but I don't know if I've ever seen that when they're actually married. Now, her husband, if I remember correctly, he died just this year, 2018, and his gravesite or his memorial page says that his remains are unknown. So to me, it seems most likely that they both were cremated and maybe the ashes were given to the children and they're holding them. Or they've buried them somewhere private and don't want them to be public. I'm not really sure. But since I was here visiting Jimmy Dodd from the MOUSEKETEERS, also Roy Williams, I thought I would at least stop by because actually the Funicellos are just right around the corner. I mean, you can just walk there. It's just right around. You go to the end of the street here, make a left, and just go to the right, and you'll see where Roy Williams is interred. And then just down below the outdoor mausoleum is where Jimmy Dodd is buried. So they're all very close to each other. It's all one big happy family here, I guess. So anyway, if anyone knows for sure where Annette Funicello is actually buried, please let me know. I would really like to know. If you search the Forest Lawn Hollywood Hills website, Annette Funicello is not listed at all. And I believe everyone buried here in the cemetery is listed on the website. That's why I don't believe that she's buried in the unmarked grave next to her parents. But I can't say for certain. I suppose it's possible that if you're buried in the cemetery, you can request that your name not show up on their website. So for now, it'll just have to remain a mystery, unless anyone watching can solve it. Now this small section, is right behind the churchyard. You can see the church there. And this is the churchyard section here in the center. So when you come in the front gates, make the very first left, and it'll be this street right here. It's just going to curve around and it'll be right here. It's a very small section if you're interested in visiting the Funicellos. Doreen Tracey died this year, 2018, at the age of 74. The location of her final resting place is currently unknown. The same goes for Cheryl Holdridge, who died in 2009 at the age of 64. Don Grady died in 2012 at the age of 68 and was reportedly cremated and his ashes were scattered. Like Annette Funicello, Don Grady had a very successful acting and singing career after leaving the MOUSEKETEERS and the Mickey Mouse Club. Don is probably best remembered for his role on the popular 1960s TV sitcom My Three Sons. He was also in a band during the 1960s that recorded a couple of hit songs. As I mentioned earlier, if anyone watching knows where these unknown final resting places are located, please share with us in the comment section. And last but not least is the final resting place of the honorary Mouseketeer Walt Disney, the man who created the show and who occasionally appeared on the show, is buried not far away from Forest Lawn Hollywood Hills at Forest Lawn Glendale. It's around 5 or 10 miles east of the cemetery and about a 10 or 15 minute drive. His very modest family niche garden is located just to the left of the entrance to the Freedom Mausoleum. As always, thanks for joining me today. And if you enjoyed this video, please share it with a friend, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll hope to see you next time.